Should you travel to Peru to hike the Salkantay Trail, or should you travel to Tanzania to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? Today, I'm comparing the two. Let's talk about guides. The guides that we used on Mount Kilimanjaro were super professional. They were trained at taking care of altitude sickness, and they were doing a really good job of keeping an eye on us, keeping a pulse of the group, and very aware of what we needed as far as food, water, and any help along the way. On Kilimanjaro, we did medical checks, so every evening, they would check our oxygen levels and our heart rate. And if we were below a certain number, then we weren't supposed to keep going, but we all wanted to keep going. So we would warm up our fingers to make sure that our oxygen levels were high enough to keep on hiking. They didn't really pay attention to what the numbers on the pulse oximeter, did I say that right? I don't know. They didn't pay attention to those numbers. They didn't really care about it. They cared more about how we were feeling and what they were seeing. In Peru, it was completely different. Every morning and every night, our guides would check our pulse and our oxygen, and then we had to fill out this little survey that was like, how are you feeling today? And write down any symptoms that we had or just how we were feeling. I liked filling out that piece of paper, and I liked that our guides knew how we were feeling in a way that was private and confidential without us even having to go up and tell them like, hey, I have diarrhea. But I also wonder if this paper was a cover your ass thing. And as someone who's been a guide for lots of years and been in the outdoor industry, I can't help but wonder if the piece of paper is, so if someone goes back and says, I was really, really sick, but the guides didn't take care of me, they have a piece of paper that's like, yeah, actually I did. I asked you how you were feeling. So it's just two different approaches to medical care. So Kilimanjaro was very hands-off, but we're watching. And Peru was very, fill out the form, let's talk about it, what do the numbers say, and then if you're sick, we're gonna hop on a call with our teledoc. Another big difference between the guides on Kilimanjaro and the guides on the Salkantay Trail in Peru is Kilimanjaro just felt like a constant party. Whenever morale would get low, whenever we would start to hike really slowly, whenever we'd start to kind of drag ass, our guides would just start singing and clapping and dancing. And so it just felt like an entire party from the time we started the trek till we got to the summit and then back down. In Peru, I really missed that sense of enthusiasm and excitement that music can bring when you're on the trail. I wish I could have captured some of that Tanzanian guide energy and infused it into our group in Peru, because there were times when morale was pretty low and I was like, okay, what can I play on my phone? What music do I have downloaded to kind of liven up the energy and bring up the fun? If you want this positive, fun, upbeat, musical experience, then definitely climb Kilimanjaro. Let's talk about campsites. On Kilimanjaro, of course, you're in a national park, you're very remote, only so many people can be on the trail a day. It's very, very regulated. We saw lots of people on the trails, and then there were lots of people in these big campgrounds, but our group would kind of like go and kind of do our own thing and be with our own small group. So while it was crowded, it didn't feel crowded, and I loved the remoteness of our campgrounds, and I loved feeling like it was us and this big, big, big mountain. The Salkantay Trail, I was hoping to have that same kind of backcountry wilderness feeling on the Salkantay Trail, but I should have known better. The very first night felt a lot like Kilimanjaro because we're in this big, big campsite. It's very scenic, very beautiful, very remote. We're eating in a dining tent, you know, the cooks are cooking in a tent. It felt very much like an expedition. But for the other nights on the Salkantay Trail, we were camping in campgrounds, but really they were like someone's home or farm, and then they would just like rent out the space. The Salkantay Trail, even though it was remote, it also felt really urban when we would hike into these villages and then camp on someone's farm. It was just like a really different experience. And me personally, I enjoyed the remote, rugged, backcountry feel of Kilimanjaro over Peru, except for that very first night when we camped in this gorgeous campsite, which is literally the prettiest place I've ever slept in my entire life. Let's talk about the trail. So on Kilimanjaro, we did the 7-day Machame Route, so we didn't cover an extreme amount of distance. I forget the distance off the top of my head, but it's not like a huge amount. Some days we would only hike 3 or 4 or 5 miles, but the whole time you're going up, 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 you're climbing uphill. The distance isn't that far. It seems pretty far because you're just climbing nonstop. There's not a section of the Machame Route where you feel like you're walking on a road. You feel like you're on a path pretty much the entire time. I thought that that's what the Salkantay Trail would be. I thought we would be hiking on a path, but there was a day, we spent about a half day hiking down a road, and it was just hot, sunny, and miserable. I just did not like it at all. And I guess I found out later that we had to hike down this road because the trail had been washed out by a landslide. But still, I was not expecting a road walk. That was a little bit disappointing about the Salkantay Trail. I wanted it all to be on a trail and not to spend 7 miles hiking down a road, dodging cars, in the hot, hot sun. As far as the trails themselves go, Kilimanjaro and the Salkantay Trail are completely different. Like with Kilimanjaro, your goal is the summit. So you start low and you hike uphill for days and days and days and days, and then you reach the summit, and then it's like you got to get down, you got to come down in elevation. With the Salkantay Trail, it's really weird because you're in Cusco, and then, which is pretty high in elevation. And then the very first day of hiking, you're up to 14,000 feet. And then the second day, you're up to 15,000 feet. And then it's down, 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 down. And Machu Picchu itself is at a pretty low elevation. Kilimanjaro, you have this time to acclimate as you're climbing and as you're getting higher and higher and higher towards the mountain. But with the Salkantay Trail, it's like boom, altitude right out of the gate. And we had a whole lot more altitude sickness in Peru than we did on Kilimanjaro. And I think it's because you just don't have time to acclimate and to get used to that elevation, or to just get used to going up, up, up before it's like wham, you're climbing the mountain. So it's just two very different trails. Part of me was wondering, what would it be like to do the reverse Salkantay Trail and to start at Aguas Caliente, the little town closest to Machu Picchu. What if you started there and then you went gradually up, right? And then quickly down? It would be completely different. They don't do the trail that way, I don't think, but I think I would actually prefer to do the trail that way, with more gradual uphill hiking at a lower elevation to get acclimated before the big push. On Kilimanjaro, we had porters and we had guides. The porters would carry all of our clothing, all of our gear, all of our food. They would set up our tents. They would filter our water. The cooks would cook our food. We were very, very well taken care of. And those porters were incredible. They carried just all the things, and they did such a good job of taking care of us. We didn't have porters in Peru on the Salkantay Trail. I believe on the Inca Trail you have porters because horses aren't allowed, but on the Salkantay Trail, horses are allowed for the first couple days of the trail. So instead of porters on the Salkantay Trail, you have horsemen. And the horsemen are the ones that pack up camp and set up your tents, and then cooks to cook your meals and filter your water. Sometimes on Kilimanjaro, the trail got a little crowded, especially early in the morning after we'd left and the porters had packed up camp. Then they would have to hurry to get to the next camp. So there's about an hour or two when the trails are quite congested with all the hikers and all the porters, but it's okay. On the Salkantay Trail, the first 2 days, it's just a lot of horses and a lot of hikers. It was very crowded, and some of the time the horses would be on the same trail as the hikers, and it's a lot different to be passed by a human than it is to be passed by a horse, or to pass a human than it is to pass a horse. And the horses are there because the altitude is so extreme, and a lot of people end up riding horses instead of hiking. It's just different sharing a trail with horses than with people, and I live in southeastern Wyoming, so horses are whatever, they're a thing here. Not like scared of horses, but sometimes I would get a little uncomfortable with horses, especially when they would just walk right up to us without their horse horsemen present. Not all guiding companies did a good job of making sure that their horses were contained. The horses also do another thing that's kind of interesting. So their only way to get to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro is with your own strength. If you're sick, if you're hurt, you can't do it. It's just how it is. With the Salkantay Trail in Peru, the goal is the Salkantay Pass. And because there are horses, a lot of people can get to the pass, which makes it very, very crowded. You're in this beautiful place and it's extremely crowded, and it's crowded because the horses are there, not just to carry up the gear, but also to carry up people who are sick or hurt, which I think it's great for everybody to be able to get to the Salkantay Pass and experience it. And we had people in our own group who rode horses because they were so sick from altitude sickness, and I think that's great. But at the same time, it felt really chaotic at the pass because it was so crowded because of the horses. Just know that going in, that if you think the altitude's gonna kick your ass, then definitely do the Salkantay Trail because there's the option to ride a horse to get to the pass. But just know that it adds this element of busyness to the pass, but at the same time, it means the whole group can be there. Let's talk about food. I'm not a picky eater. I think that comes from years and years in the army and deployments to Iraq. I'll pretty much eat most everything except for mayonnaise if I'm hungry. But the food on Kilimanjaro started off really good, but it got kind of redundant. And you got to think about it. All of our food is being transported by porters. So there's not like a lot of room for variety within our diet. So it makes sense that the food on Kilimanjaro was still tasty every single day, but got a little bit redundant. Now, on the Salkantay Trail, we had amazing food. It was delicious, it was fresh, it was unique. They baked us a cake, but the only night the cooks are really in a remote area is that very first night. All the other nights, they're cooking in kind of this mobile kitchen type area that each of these campgrounds have. So the cooks have a lot more resources available to them to make the meals better. The food on the Salkantay Trail was way better than it was in Kilimanjaro. So if you're a foodie, then definitely the Salkantay Trail is the trail you need to take. They made us tortillas shaped like llamas, you guys, seriously, for lunch one day. It was amazing. When it comes to putting together guides and porters and horsemen and cooks, I'm not really sure how that all works in Kilimanjaro or in Peru. But I will say that on Kilimanjaro, it felt like our guides and porters were a team. It felt like they knew each other's names. They were buddies. They do the same trip over and over and over again. There was camaraderie that we saw amongst the porters and amongst the guides, but we also had a really incredible lead guide, John, who I think kind of instilled that feeling of camaraderie and friendship amongst this group that was helping us get up this gigantic mountain. It felt really different on the Salkantay Trail. And we had a lead guide and an assistant guide who worked really, really well together. But I didn't get the feeling like they were a team with the horsemen and with the cooks. I wanted to get to know the names of the cooks and the horsemen. And I asked one of the guides and they didn't know the names of the horsemen and the cooks. So I think it's kind of contracted out, and I think they're all freelancers. I don't think they work together. I don't think they come together, at least with the company that we use. It just felt different in Peru. It just had a different vibe, and everybody was great. Everybody took really good care of us in Peru. The vibe was just a little bit different. One thing that was really cool in Peru that needs to happen on Kilimanjaro is that very first night, it was really cold. We're in this mountain valley. It was freezing cold and windy. It was great. But we had all gone to our tents to go to bed, and all of a sudden our guide zipped up our tents and put in a hot water bottle and gave us each a hot water bottle to put on our feet or hold against our belly. And that was really a nice touch. That did not happen on Kilimanjaro, but that was one thing that took it to 5-star service in Peru. Now, if you have watched our videos about Kilimanjaro, you know that on Kilimanjaro, we hike pole pole, or slowly, like 1 mile an hour or slower was the pace for most of the Kilimanjaro climb. And that's intentional because those guides, they want us to reach the summit, and they don't want us to be burned out or sick. They want to keep us healthy. They want to help us get acclimated. And we do that by hiking slowly, pole pole on Kilimanjaro. Salkantay felt a little different to me. Now, I like to hike slowly, and I learned that on Kilimanjaro. I'm trying to apply the pole concept to everything in my life. I don't want to rush around. I don't want to be fast. I want to be slow and deliberate with everything I do, whether I'm hiking or skiing or cooking dinner for my family. I just want to take a pole approach to life. I've been trying to implement this pole concept into my life, and then I go to Peru and it's completely different. And on the Salkantay Trail, there were a lot of FU stops. I don't know if you know what an FU stop is, but it's when the fastest people in the group stop and then the slower people catch up and then the faster people go. So the slower people don't necessarily get a chance to stop and catch their breath. That happened a lot in Peru, and it really bothered me, and I had to just let it go because that's how they do it. That's how they do the trail. Hike fast, and then stop. Sometimes the breaks were too long. It's like go, stop, and brake. And then go, and then stop and brake. And I think I'm the kind of person that would just like to slow the pace down, keep going, and not stop for so long, but get to the campsite early so you have more time to rest and recover before the next day's hike. You know, it's really hard to compare Kilimanjaro with Salkantay Trail because they were both great. We had incredible guides for both trips. We had great cooks for both trips. We had good people taking care of us for both trips. The logistics worked out. The gear was good. All the things were really good for both trips. And I've kind of laid out the pros and cons to both of these adventures. And for me personally, it comes down to this. Would I do the Salkantay Trail again, or would I do Mount Kilimanjaro again? And the truth is, I would not do the Salkantay Trail again because it didn't provide that rugged, remote backcountry feeling, but I'm so glad that I did it. And I had a ton of fun on the Salkantay Trail, but I absolutely love climbing Kilimanjaro. I think Kilimanjaro is, for me personally, the most special mountain, and I can't wait to climb it again. So I'm going to be going back to do Kilimanjaro next August, leading another group, and hopefully I'll be able to lead a group of women to climb Mount Kilimanjaro every single year. But I don't plan on doing the Salkantay Trail in Peru again. However, if I do go back to Peru, and if I do another trip to Peru, the circuit that I want to do is the Asangade, which is this beautiful mountain, and there's a trail that goes around the Asangade that gives you that remote backcountry feel, and that's going to be my next Peruvian adventure.